الشمس والقمر بحسبان والنجم والشجر يسجدان والسماء رفعها ووضع الميزان ألا تطغوا في الميزان وأقيموا الوزن بالقسط ولا تخسروا الميزان والأرض وضعها للأنام فيها فاكهة والنخل ذات الأكمام والحب ذو العصف والريحان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان خلق الإنسان من صلصال كالفخار وخلق الجن من مرج من نار فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان رب المشرقين ورب المغربين فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان مرج البحرين يلتقيان بينهما برزخ لا يبغيان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان يخرج منهما اللؤلؤ والمرجان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان وله الجوار المنشآت في البحر كالأعلام فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان كل من عليها فان ويبقى وجه ربك ذو الجلال والإكرام فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان صدق الله العلي العظيم. فاتحة صفوف الصلاة على محمد وآل محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجا.
أفلح من صلى على محمد وعلى آل بيت محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
أزور سيدتي ومولاتي أم البنين عليها أفضل الصلاة والسلام، زيارة مني ونيابة عن والدي ووالد والدي وعن جميع المؤمنين والمؤمنات، قربة طاعة إلى الله تعالى. السلام عليك أيتها الطيبة الطاهرة، السلام عليك أيتها الصابرة الشاكرة، السلام عليك أيتها العالمة العاملة، السلام عليك أيتها الفاضلة الزكية، السلام عليك أيتها التقية النقية، السلام عليك أيتها الرضية المرضية، السلام عليك يا زوجة ولي الله، السلام عليك يا حليلة أمير المؤمنين، السلام عليك يا أم البنين، السلام عليك يا أم العباس ابن أمير المؤمنين عليه السلام، السلام عليك وعلى أولادك الأربعة المستشهدين بين يدي الحسين عليه السلام يوم عاشوراء، رضوان الله تعالى عليك، وجعل الله أعالي الجنة منزلك ومأواك يا وجيهة عند الله، يا وجيهة عند الله، اشفعي لنا عند الله يا وجيهة، يا وجيهة عند الله، اشفعي لنا عند الله يا وجيهة عند الله، اشفعي لنا عند الله. وصلى الله على محمد وآل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Condolences to the Imam of our time, Imam al-Hajj Ajala Faraj Sharif, for the Wafat anniversary of Ummul Baneen alayhi salam. a lady of greatness, the mother of Wafat alayhi salam. And we've invited Sayyid Abbas. He's come all the way from South London. He is a human rights lawyer, but he's been doing Hawza at the same time. He's been studying for 6 years at the Hawza Almiya in England, and he hosts monthly reflection podcasts on YouTube. So without further delay, I'd like to welcome him with 3 loud salats ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
سيدنا حجاز تفضل سورة الفاتحة. صل على محمد وآل محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، وصلى الله على سيدنا مولانا حبيب الله العالمين أبو القاسم المصطفى محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد
وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين، ولعنة الله على القوم الظالمين من الآن إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد، قال الله الحكيم في محكم كتابه الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والمؤمنين والمؤمنات بعضهم أولياء بعض. صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوات على محمد وآل محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. We first thank our dear brothers for hosting today's Majlis for Lady Ummul Baneen alayhi salam. It is a great honor to recite on the occasion of her wafat, of her death, and for the sake of the family members of our host today, for the continuation of this family and the barakah for all his marhumeen. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
I'd also like to thank all of you. It's an honor to be reciting for this community in Manchester. If there is a plan somewhere to make me move from South London, you are succeeding, because I always get such a great reception and the brothers give such love here. So thank you all of you, inshallah. Today's topic that I wanted to speak about in today's Majalis comes from a concept which exists both in Western philosophy and in Islam from the Ahl al-Bayt in the Quran. And it's extremely relevant for all types of social relations. And this is the topic of empathy, or as al-awatif in Arabic. When it comes to empathy, this responds to how we relate to each other and whether or not I can understand the feeling which you are experiencing. That is empathy. Do I understand what's going through in your life? Do you understand me? Do we see one another as human beings? And empathy is that word which is often used to describe how well you recognize somebody else's emotions. Some people are very good at this. They are empaths. For them, if you're in a bad mood, they will know without you telling them. Usually it's mothers, but they'll pick up on something about you and they'll see some micro action. I think this person is in a bad mood. Some people, you just get good vibes around them because somehow in them they can express themselves very empathically. These are people who are naturally, some people it's a bit harder. I can't always tell what someone else is experiencing. I need to communicate and say, can you tell me, how do you feel about this thing? Did you like this? Do you like me? You need to vocalize yourself. In any case, empathy is important in all relationships and all aspects of brotherhood, sisterhood, family relations at every level. There is a level of muhabbat to Ahl al-Bayt, alayhim afdal salatu wassalam, There's a level of that muhabba, you could even call it a level of ishq with them, which you can't reach unless you understand empathy. You come to a certain point where I love Ahlul Bayt, I follow them, but I haven't fallen in love with them because I didn't know them in order to love them that deeply. And the tool and the mechanism to know Ahlul Bayt, to fall in love with them, is empathy. So today, inshallah, I want to quickly go through what is this idea of empathy in the West, in Western psychology, Western philosophy. How do Ahlul Bayt define it, and how is, in some ways, our view of empathy so much more, meaningful than the example in Western psychology? And what are the examples we have from empathy, so that when it comes to me and you and our responsibility, I can use this tool, this mechanism of empathy, to fall in love with the Imam of my time, and more than fall in love with them, I'll understand them better. So when it comes to the Musibah of Ummul Baneen and Ahlul Bayt, I know more about them. So naturally my heart collapses at the Musibah. We'll get there, inshallah, but to get there we have to find out what is this thing called empathy. Now, this is not the most, wah Pakistani topic in the beginning. But if you are with me for the beginning, inshallah, I need your support. We'll get there. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Are you guys with me, inshallah? Okay. Empathy comes from the ancient Greek, from two root letters, M and pathos. Pathos, or those of you who've studied English or like reading, responds to character. You often ask yourself when you're reading a story or a book, what is this character feeling right now? What's going through the mind of the character? That's pathos. M in Greek, and I lived in Greece for a while working, M is a preposition for being in something. So M, pathos, means you are in feelings. You're in someone's feelings, yourself or somebody else. And in ancient Greek theatre, pathos was the word you'd use when the character says what they're feeling. So they're watching these ancient plays, and you go to Greece now and they have these massive, Colosseums where they have these shows. And the character, when they speak about their own feelings, that's called pathos. When you are observing someone else's feeling, that's called empathy. And that's used in ancient Greek. Now, Aristotle would say that empathy is the basis of all friendship. Any friend that you have is based on empathy. How? He says empathy is when you recognize your friend and your friend recognizes you. Not just your face, they recognize you. Like how you think, how you react, and they have already in line with what's inside you, and you are the same. And the moment that's mutual, that becomes empathy. Okay, so it goes through both steps. Now, the problem with this view, first of all, is this is said by who? Aristotle. When? Ancient Greece. But ancient Greek civilization was built upon slavery. It was built upon the oppression of people. In some ways built upon kufr. So where was the empathy for the slave who was building this civilization from scratch? You know the film 300, which we see sometimes. They make the story as if, you had this ancient Persians, and they were these evil tyrants trying to subjugate the people of Greece, who were so freedom-loving and democratic, and these 300 would never bow down their swords to bow to a tyrant. When the truth is, 300 Spartans were following and had with them hundreds of slaves supporting them the whole way through. So this whole society, which they speak about empathy, is not really built on empathy at all. Okay, that's one problem with that view. What's empathy? It's understanding someone else's feeling, but you can't restrict it to just one or two classes. Everyone has to be recognized then. We'll come to why that's a problem later. The other view of empathy in Western psychology comes from the difference between empathy and sympathy, which are not the same thing. Okay, inshallah, I need your attention for this part. Brené Brown is a psychologist. She makes this distinction. She goes, what's empathy and sympathy? Empathy is when you are fueling connection with someone. Sympathy, when you have sympathy for somebody, is when you're fueling disconnection from them. How? She gives an example. You're walking in the street, you see a person in a hole in the ground. Okay. The empathy of that situation is you going and saying, you know something, I've been in a hole myself in life, and I know what you're going through. I recognize what they're going through. I see it in myself, and I communicate it in a non-judgmental way. I've been there. I know what you're feeling. That's empathy. Sympathy is finding them saying, oh, what a shame you're stuck in this hole. Or if only you hadn't fallen into this hole. Or, oh, poor you, bless you. I feel so sorry for you. Pity. Sympathy puts you above someone, where you think, I'm above them, and I can make a statement about them. Empathy puts you down with them, and you're together. In that hole, I've been there. You know that suffering you're going through, which you want to tell me about? I experienced that 10 years ago. I know what it's like. This is empathy. Sympathy automatically places me one level higher than you because I have to look down at you to pity you. So the Western view of empathy has these two caveats. In Islam, from Ahlul Bayt, from the Quran, we have two features which go against these two features. Number one, in Islam, empathy is universal. There's no structure of slavery in Islam, no structure of discrimination. All people are welcome into one community of one wilayah. That's different. Because in Western psychology, you have ideas like slavery and recognition and all these different discriminations which affect the postmodern era now. But in Islam, we just have love for Allah, muhabbat for Allah, itaat of Allah, and everyone else is measured by their relation to Allah Azza wa Jal. What does the Prophet say? There's no black or white distinction, there is just taqwa. And everything exists on this spectrum of taqwa. Here's the other reason why we have a different view. In the view of Western psychology, you can have sympathy for someone, but in Islam, you cannot. You will not find anywhere in Ahlul Bayt or the Quran an example where because of someone's suffering, I'm above them. It simply does not exist. It's not in the resources of naql or aql in truth. Well, because someone's going through hardship and I see that, it makes me higher than them? Where does this come from? This idea is false. Now, some of the Khawarij did believe this because they believed when you commit a sin, you become the sin itself. And because of the extent of your sin, in their case, for example, killing the Khalifa of the time, you can be excommunicated from Islam. But we don't believe the sinner is the sin. Someone came to Rasulullah Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And they said, what's the difference between the sinner and the sin? How are these two things different? Prophet replied, they are different. The person, when they commit a sin, at that time, the riwayat, I think in Tafsir Al-Qummi or Ayashi says, the riwayat is, when you commit a sin, at that time, Iman leaves your heart and you do the action. Now the mu'mineen, Iman re-enters the heart and you do istighfar after the sin. The moment you did the sin, that's the sin. But you who exist before, during and after, that's you. You are not the sin which you committed. You are the content of your heart. And your heart can have in it sin and it can have in it Iman as well. It can have both. The heart is built like that. But what can't happen is to have Iman in the heart while you're committing a sin. That's not possible. The heart's not built like that. For example, the Prophet even says you can't have love of dunya and love of Allah at the same time in the same heart. Like, it's not possible. These two things simply don't exist. They are so eternally conflicting with one another. That person will be completely in flux for their whole life, so unstable and spiritually. So no, sometimes one enters the heart, one leaves the heart. Okay, so you're not the same thing. Why is it relevant to our discussion? It's because of this. I can't look down at anyone. I just don't get to. They are not a sin. They are a person who maybe is going through a rough patch, but I don't get to pity or look down at them. There's no one. In fact, Allah says to Musa ala nabiyina, find someone who you're better than, anyone. So Musa goes through the Qawm of Banu Israel, he's looking, he says, well, that person, I don't know how much Allah loves them. He keeps going, well, that person, okay, they've done this wrongdoing, but maybe they're better than me in this thing. I can't find anyone. He finds lying on the ground a dog, which is rabid and flea infested. And he thinks to himself, no, not even this dog, because maybe I've done a sin or something wrong which this dog has not done. So he goes back to Allah and says, Ya Allah, I searched the earth and found no one who is better, who I can say I'm better than. And Allah replies, this is why you are Musa, because of this. Because you don't view anyone as under you. That makes you great in Allah's eyes. There's a narration from Ali alayhi salam in Nahj al-Balagha where he says, I had a brother in faith once. He was big in my eyes because the dunya was small in his eyes. The more you humble yourself and make yourself lower, the greater you are in the eyes of Allah and eyes of Ahlul Bayt. So this view is different. We don't have sympathy in Islam. We don't have it. We have empathy. Now, why do I like this topic? Because I read one narration and that made me think of this whole topic. And the narration comes from Musa al-Kadhim alayhi salam. So now, we want to know, we get why empathy from the West is not exactly what we follow. How do Ahlul Bayt speak about this concept of empathy? So, by the way, I read this narration on, I think it was on Twitter, and it had a reference, and I don't know at the time if you remember, people were saying, if you have a narration, you don't give a reference to this narration, we have to cancel this person, and we have to, finish them in the retweets and things like this. So I searched the book and it's there, alhamdulillah, in the form that it's there, so we are safe. Okay, Imam al-Qadim alayhi salam, he says, يَعْرِفُ شِدَّةُ الْجَوْرِ مَنْ حَكَمْ بِهِ عَلَيْهِ. The one who has suffered from injustice, only they can recognize its intensity. I'll say it again to make it clear. Only the one who has suffered injustice can observe it in other places. It's a deep concept, but we owe Imam al-Qadim to understand it. When I have gone through suffering, only then can I see it in you. And you, when you've gone through something, can see it in me. But the issue is there's different intensities of suffering. Empathy is when I've been through some of what you've been through. And even some of what I've been through. And someone says to you, brother, I'm going through this issue. And you can say to them, well, I've been through the same thing, the same suffering, the same jawr. Maybe of a different type or form, but it's the same substance. And because of that, we can have a conversation about it. So empathy starts that I've been through something and it was hard. And I recognize that in you. I see how hard you are working because I've worked that hard to stay away from that same sin. Okay, it goes further from a different narration. This time from Amir al-Mu'minin Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. Al-awatif is empathy in Islam. Muhammad says, Kathratul awatif, kathratul ma'arif. The more empathy you have, the more people you'll have around you. Or ma'arif meaning the more acquaintances or people who know you. The more empathetic you are, the more closer people will feel to you, and the more you'll recognize others around you. You'll want to be with people, they'll want to be with you because you recognize one another, you see one another. The more empathetic you are, the more you recognize others, the closer they stay with you. And when you need them, they're there. There's no doubt about it. One mu'min is in trouble, he sees me and I see him. We share love of Ali ibn Abi Talib. I'm never letting go of that person. That's awatif in its true form. Now we see empathy all over the literature. When you fast in Shahr Ramadan, this is empathy. It's you sharing the suffering of somebody else. Our sixth Imam says, someone says to him, why do we fast in Shahr Ramadan? He says, so that the rich person can feel the sensation of the poor. And only then they know what the poor person goes through for the whole year. Someone writes to our 11th Imam, same question to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Why is it wajib to fast? I get why it's good, recommended. Why wajib? He says, because when the rich person feels the hunger of the poor person, after the end of the month, they'd have more raham for them, more mercy for them, because they spent a whole month without food. So now they'll find themselves naturally towards them in mercy. Why? Because they went through a whole month of empathy. I don't eat, you don't eat. I'm hungry, you're hungry. I'm starving, you're starving. And only then through that suffering do I see what they're going through. And once I see them, I love them. They are the same as me. There's no difference. And then you reach a whole new level. We see empathy when it comes to brotherhood as well. Shaykh Muhammad Baqir al-Hakim, rahmatullah alayhi, has a good discussion about empathy in brotherhood. He says, and he mentions many riwayat about this, where our sixth Imam discusses, the true brother is someone who does jihad fit tawasul. They struggle for communication with one another, and they do an aqd, a contract, a promise of empathy. They find it hard to speak sometimes. It's jihad for them, but they speak even when it's hard. And empathy, they don't just say, I'm going to be empathetic to you. They make a promise towards them. Aqd is used. Aqd is used in a contract when you get married. It's a very strong word. I make a contract with the brothers to be empathetic towards your needs. And I make sure I speak to you, even when it's hard, when I don't want to have a difficult conversation. I do jihad fi sabilillah just to talk. And this comes from the narrations as well. We see empathy as when it comes to the leader. Imam Ali Islam says once about empathy, but why a leader must be empathetic. They have to understand what the poor are going through. He says, a true leader must know exactly what the poor from among them is going through, so that they are not surprised by the eventuality of poverty. They need to know what this thing is of poverty. You can't be so removed from the poor, you don't know what this thing is. Later on he even says in a different letter, how can I be called Amir al-Mu'baneen? He says this, how can I be called this? When you expect me to live a lavish life where the poor don't recognize me anymore. And he says, how can I let my greed overtake me? And how can I eat lavishly when someone in Hijaz or Yamama has no bread? And he looks at people and he says to them, you know something to all of you? I should be eating when all around me are empty stomachs and dry livers? This is Amir al-Mu'mineen? Hayat, of course not, it's not. So the idea is even a leader must be so empathetic to the poor, they know exactly what they're going through. They are with them. The one who leads salat should be leading the way that the weakest from them can pray. This is in the narration from Imam alayhi salam as well, Nahj Balagha. Not too fast, not too slow. If they lead too fast, he says it to Malik al-Ashtar actually in the famous letter. If you pray too fast, Malik, those who are weak from you can't keep up. If you pray too slow, those whose bodies are frail can't keep up. Pray according to the weakest from you. The most da'if minnak. That's how you should pray. So the leader has to have empathy. Society, we need to have empathy. Fasting, Shahr Ramadan, I've got to have empathy. The question is, okay, how? This is the right question. I get this concept, it's important. What does it look like to have empathy? The best example I could give you, and anyone could give you, of the most empathetic being on this earth is Khatimun Nabiyyin Rasulullah Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Not only his khuluqin adim, not only his makarim al-akhlaq, he's rahmatullahi al-alameen. He's a mercy for all mankind. And what that means is, when he's empathetic, all of us must follow this example. What's empathy again? To make sure you feel the sensation of suffering to recognize another person. In the Quran, I found at least 3, and there are definitely more examples where empathy is clearly mentioned in the Quran and how we can copy it, inshallah. If you're with me, Sallallahu Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. The first of the 3 examples comes from Surah Tawbah, verse 1 to 8. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. لَقَدْ جَاءَكُمْ رَسُولٌ مِّنْ أَنفُسِكُمْ. There certainly comes to you a prophet from you. Fi anfusakum. He came from you. Why is that relevant? Azizun alayhi ma anittum. When you suffer, it's important to him. When you are in distress, he finds it grievous. Harisun alaykum. It concerns him. He's worried when you're in pain. Bil mu'minina ra'ufur rahim. And so, with the mu'minin, he is kind and merciful. Why? Because he's from you. He's lived with you, he's come from you, he knows your family. He's living in the same time. He's in the valley of Abu Talib with you. He's from you. And not just he's from you. When he sees you in pain, he feels it. Harisun. It's like he's feeling the same pain which is in them. This word is used for a parent when they're worried about their child. When they're worried for their child. Rasulullah, who even says, Ali and I, Ali wa ana min abna al-ummah. We are the fathers of this qawm. We worry for this community. We feel pain when it's in pain. So the first empathy in the Quran is this. A prophet came to you, from you. He was concerned about you. When you were in pain, he felt that distress. Now we find the same narrations, by the way, about Sahib al-Zaman as well, where our 12th Imam is Sallallahu Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Again, in Nahj Balagha, where so many of these gems come from, Imam Ali Islam describes Imam Zaman alayhi salam. So this is during his time. He says, you know who he is? He'll be someone who's like a stranger watching the qawm, and when it is in pain, he feels the hurt. He even says he's like it's a gharib. He's a stranger, he's alone. But when the qawm hurts, he's in pain. We need a whole discourse about how Imam alayhi salam is intimately connected to this qawm. He's not just something accidental to it, he is part of this qawm. In many ways, this qawm is how it is because of the personality of Imam Zaman alayhi salam. And Imam completely reacts to how this qawm is going. You know that narration you've heard, where the Imam alayhi salam cries when his followers commit sins. We have this in our narrations, or in hadith from ulama. It's true. He's connected to this thing. When we do something, he feels pain. That's empathy. And Rasulullah came min anfusikum, from you. So it's as if you yourself are in pain when you see him crying. That's the first example, okay, from Surah 9, verse 1 to 8. Earlier in the same surah, verse 61, we have another example of another form of empathy. This verse, Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. وَمِنْهُمْ, and among you, again, from among you or from among them, same thing, from you. الَّذِينَ يُعَدُّونَ النَّبِيِّ, some people who actually insult the Prophet. So this time, the idea changes. From among you, they're not somewhat empathetic, some of them among you who insult the Prophet, who are mean towards him. In what example? وَيَقُولُونَ, and they say, هُوَ أَذُنٌ, he is just an ear. They say this about him. Why is that an insult? Because the Holy Prophet was known to be a very good listener. He was well known. He'd spend a long time listening to any question from anybody. Hatta a child could ask him, he'd sit down and answer their question. And the kuffar saw this and used it as an insult, that all you do is listen and, you know, spend time standing, don't have anything better than just listening to us. The Rasulullah would listen so attentively. They say, if he's sitting in a group, when someone enters, of course, he would stand. He'd give them space near him if there was space. If they want to speak to him or not, if they're sitting on the ground and he's not, he'd open up his robe for them to sit upon. If he's leaning on something hard behind him and he's got a cushion and they've not, he'd give them his cushion. If they want to speak, he'd be silent and let them speak. If they're speaking, the narration says he would turn his body to look at them while they speak towards him. This is called active listening, which they teach now. Our Prophet taught us 1400 years ago, when someone speaks, your whole body's listening towards them. And when a yatim comes, he'd sit them in his lap, hold them, kiss them on the foot, and then listen. Why? Alam yajidka yatiman fa'awa. Did we not find you orphan and give you care? Now, because you felt the pain of being yatim, you have more love for the aitam. He sits them down and asks them. So when they saw this, they insulted him. You are just an ear. All you do is listen to people. The Quran answers, however, say, قُلْ أَذُنٌ خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ. He's an ear who's actually good for you. He's here to benefit you. If he's a listener, he's a good listener. And the verse continues, يُؤْمِنُونَ بِاللَّهِ. He believes Allah. وَيُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْمُؤْمِنِينَ وَرَحْمَةً. And he believes the mu'mineen. وَرَحْمَةً لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا مِنْكُمْ. And he's a mercy from Allah for those of you who believe. I thought he's Rahmatullahi al-Alameen. But no. He's been sent for Rahmatullahi al-Alameen. But only some people appreciate him. Those who appreciate him are those who listen towards him. And to listen to him is to find him empathetic to your needs. When you speak, he'll be completely attentive towards you. Which means when he speaks, we should be the same. So the first verse is what? The Holy Prophet is empathetic because he feels pain when you're in pain. And that's true today as well. There's a narration in Nahj Balagha again where the Prophet is called by Islam, Tabibun Dawarun bit-tibbih. I love this narration. He's like a roaming doctor. And he had with him awaris, he had with him instruments, and he's looking for which of you are sick that he can heal you. And the narration says, I think it's Sermon 108, when you are unaware, says, he came to you, you didn't go towards him. He finds your iman weak, he gave you instruments to cure your iman. He goes towards you. Fatima alayhi salam in Khutbah Fadakiyah says a similar thing. She says, a prophet came to you, he was in distress when you were in pain. And now you are abandoning his daughter from her own haqq. Do you see the difference now? So this second verse is this. He listens to what we're going through. He's an ear and a good ear for us. Inshallah. The third verse of the empathy of the Prophet comes from Surah Al Imran, verse 159. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. فيما رحمة من الله لنت لهم. It is only by Allah's mercy that you are actually gentle with the people, Ya Muhammad. لنت لهم. Your heart is soft for them. Why? وَلَوْ كُنْتَ فَضًّا غَلِيظًا فِي قَلْبِهِ. If you had been harsh with them, and if your heart was hard towards them, لِأَنْفَضُّ مِنْ حَوْلِكَ. They would have scattered away from around you. They would not have stayed with you if you were harsh with them. But you were kind. فَاعْفُ عَنْهُمْ وَاسْتَغْفِرْ لَهُمْ. And so plead for them, help them, do dua for them. وَشَاوِرْهُمْ فِي الْأَمْرِ. And consult them in your affairs. فَإِذَا عَزَمْتَ. And so when you are relieved from all of this work that you do, فَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ. Turn back towards Allah. إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُحِبُّ الْمُتَوَكِّلِينَ. Allah has love for those who turn back towards him. You could have been harsh with them, Muhammad. You could have been hard-hearted. You could have been anything with them, but you were gentle with them because we gave you a rahmah from us. So empathy is to be gentle with each other the way the Prophet was gentle. I'll give you one story about this to make this clear and we move on, inshallah. Sallallahu Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. The example is, how was the Prophet gentle with the people in a way we can learn? Okay, one day, the Holy Prophet is sitting with his companions in a gathering maybe similar to this. They're all sitting down together. And someone comes in late to the gathering, which happens in Majlis sometimes. In fact, I've been waiting for the time when I say this, and someone actually walks in and I can say like this, but it's not happened yet. Someone walks in and they're late. Now the Prophet, of course, stands up for them, like everyone stands up for them. The custom then, like it is now, is you find an empty space and you sit in the empty space when you're late. You don't start demanding, I want to sit there, because you're late. Unless it's someone's ammo, then you have to listen to them, right? Okay, this person sat down. He happens to have been a poor man. The guy he sits next to happens to be rich. When he sits down, the rich person, seeing it's him, lifts up the hem of his clothing and moves away slightly. A tiny action. The Prophet sees. He says to him, did you think that some of his poverty will touch your clothing? The man says, no. He says, did you think that by touching him you lose some of your riches? Which is a damning line, by the way. No, he says, did you think that you will get some dirt from him onto you by being near him? He says, no, Ya Rasulullah. He said, then why did you do the act of dhulm, oppression, of moving your clothing up and moving away when you saw him? This is dhulm. The man says, Ya Rasulullah, you are right, I apologize, and in order to make right what I have done wrong, I will give half of all of my wealth to him. So already we've seen empathy in one level. The Prophet sees and imagines how that person's feeling. What is it like to be feeling marginalized and excluded and othered like this? But also empathy of who? Of the rich man to the poor man. I say, I actually feel bad of what I've done. Someone taught me with kindness, linta lahum. He could have been harsh with me. Maybe I would be harsh, maybe you'd be harsh. The Prophet was not harsh. He moved. Okay, I'll give you my half my off. Now the story continues. The poor man then says, no, I don't want any of his wealth. Why? He says, if I get his wealth, Ya Rasulullah, and I'm rich, and I become infamous by my wealth, maybe I'll treat someone else how he just treated me. And I'm worried for my soul. If you had been harsh, they would have scattered away from you. But if you are humble, they become humble just like you. I don't want this money, I don't want this wealth, I don't need it. Right now, if I make someone else feel like that, this is all empathy, it's all about understanding what someone's going through. There's no words about your feelings here. It's all something you can tell. If I did it to someone, I would feel ashamed. I don't want this money. There's no value to this money for me anymore. So the example of the Holy Prophet is this. 3 verses about this. Number 1, empathy in the sunnah of the Holy Prophet is to, when you're from the people, to be a good listener, to be kind towards them, be gentle towards them, and inshallah we hope you can follow the advice of being humble and kind when you give advice towards them. Sallallahu Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Okay. Now if you're listening so far, inshallah you're with me, you're thinking, okay, I get the empathy in Islam, comes from Ahl al-Bayt, it's humbling yourself, it's knowing what someone's going through. I get that, okay. I get that I can't have sympathy. We've gone through why that's a problem. I get that where everyone should have empathy. Rich, poor, doesn't matter. I get that. I get the Holy Prophet's empathetic. I get that too. How does this apply to my love for Ahl al-Bayt? My love, right now. That I should treat them differently somehow. Well, let's go back to the narration of Muhammad Qadr, which was that only those who've actually experienced suffering themselves can see it in others. Very important narration. If you take one thing today, take this hadith, inshallah. Only those who've experienced shiddatul jawr, how hard it is to have oppression, can see it in other people. Think about this narration for a moment. What it means then, technically, is if someone's going through something hard, no matter how they get there or how I got there, if I've gone through at least the same or more, I can speak to them. If I've gone through less, I can't fully understand what they're going through, but I can at least recognize it. That, look, I have not been through this. Someone says they've got a bereavement. I've got a pet that died. I don't know what they're going through. I can't say I've gone through. But I recognize you're in pain. At least I can say this. I see you're hurting. That's the most I can do. Okay. If we go further than this, empathy allows us to have with each other very honest conversations, which are difficult conversations. Because now I owe you something. I have to be real with you. I can't lie to you. If you're going through pain, I have to be there for you. And you've got to be there for me as well. And that means we have difficult conversations. Like, guys don't like talking about their feelings. Women, I think, can do it 5 times a day and not worry. But guys, it's hard to talk about how you're feeling. It's not easy. Even if you have a brother who you trust a brother, like you trust them, when's the right time to talk about something you're struggling with? What? In the 10 minutes after football, when you're having a burger? Like, when do you actually talk about, like, like real deep things? When? Like, these days, kids spend longer on Ultimate Team playing FIFA than in person. Well, they can talk about their feelings when they're playing football together. Like, when do you have these conversations? The mu'min should be having it. That's the point. They should be telling each other how they feel and sharing with them. But when do we have this? And when it does happen, how do you respond in an empathetic way? Like, yesterday, and this got me, a friend of mine, his 6-year-old daughter died. I know him, 6 years old. Honestly, what do I say to him? What can I possibly say which makes him think I can help his situation? Those of you who have daughters, you know more than me about how hard this is. I had a 6 years old, say the Ruqayya age, in fact a little bit older, imagine. So like I didn't know what to say. I had the phone and I wanted to call him and like say I'm here for you, but I really don't know how the words come out. So I just sent him a message to say, you know, we have been through something which we have been in the past, and we hope this moment can at least help you in your journey, and I'm praying for you and I'm here for you. But we've got to become better at these conversations, because the rates of suicide and mental health for guys is so much higher than girls, and it's because we don't talk, and we don't know how to talk. And Ahlul Bayt intend for us to have this wilayah. The verse I mentioned earlier, Mu'minun Mu'minat, Ba'adhum awliyaw ba'adhin. They guard one another, they protect one another, the mu'mineen. This is a real thing. I have to protect you and you got to protect me. I can't do this thing alone. Iman comes from Aman. Aman means security. I've got to be a safety for you. And you've got to be the same towards me. Ali Muhammad expect us to be completely safe with each other. That's empathy. And not just each other, with everyone else. Now, for those of you who are listening, we, as the followers of Ahlul Bayt, as the lovers of Abu Abdullah, as the mourners of Ummul Baneen, have one weapon for empathy no one else has, and that is the grief of Hussein alayhi salam. This sadness is a mutual sadness. You go through it, I go through it. You cry for Abu Abdullah, this heart is broken too. You know those tears which come out of your eyes? My tears are the same tears. You can't wait to go for ziyarat, my bank account is wanting the same thing. We're on the same flight to Karbala. This level of empathy you won't find anywhere else. Love of Ali Muhammad. And once you have this love, it opens up so many more doors of love among us. Why? Because you love Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. You love him. You reject every single oppressor of Sayyidah Zahra. So I'm with you until the end, I'm with you. Mountains will move. Rivers will flow, but I'll never let go of another Shia of Ali ibn Abi Talib. This only comes from the grief of Ahlul Bayt and love of Ahlul Bayt. Because I fell in love with them and we have the same object of adoration, I'm with you. But it's not just love, it's also sadness. Ya Abdullah, laqad adama ar-raziyatu. It's not just sadness, it's too much for me, it's unbearable for me. وَجَلَّتْ وَعَذَبَتْ مَصِيبَتُكَ فِي جَمِيعِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَجَمِيعِ السَّمَاوَاتِ الْأَرْضِ. It's so hard for me, I can't hold it alone, and neither can أهل السماوات والأرض. None of us can hold the sadness of you, Ya Hussein. It's so sad for me, I literally can't bear it while it's in my heart. So that means I need someone else like to share this with. So what do we say to each other? I'm giving you condolence because I can't bear this. When I'm actually in that moment thinking of Karbala and that gharib of Ghadiriyah, I can't process what's going through my mind. So I need someone to share this with. That's love of Ali Muhammad, and that's empathy you only get from this faith. In fact, it goes one step further. I can understand my own suffering when I have Ali Muhammad. Because no matter what I'm going through, it's not losing 18 members of your family in one afternoon. It's not. Whatever my imtihan is, it's not the day of Ashura. Really, it's not. Now, you can't say this to others because you don't want to be insensitive, but you can say it to yourself. Honestly, this thing I'm worrying about, it's not Karbala. And I'm losing my iman over this. We have people in our community who get so much strength from the empathy of Karbala. I'll give you a few examples. In Pakistan, I heard this story once. It still affects me. I think it was a mother in Parachinar. Her son's been shaheed by the Taliban in the area. They've sent back to her a note taunting her about how they found her sons and killed him. And in this letter there's a parcel. In the parcel they say, we have enclosed in this letter with you the nails we pulled from the hands of your sons before we killed them, so that you know what they went through while they were alive. Why? Because they were Shia. The mother first of all says, what I'm going through now is nothing like what the son of Zahra went through. She turns to her family and says to them, to other children, don't you dare stop going to the julus because of this. You should only go to the julus. What is this love which makes mothers send their children towards death? What is this thing? There's nothing like this. They went to Ma'alima Zakzaki, the wife of Sheikh Zakzaki. I said to her, you've lost 6 children in one day. In Zaria 2015, how do you feel? She says, I've returned the children to the one who gave Ali Akbar on Ashura. And none of my 6 children are worth the value of Ali al-Akbar. Where does this come from? You know where it comes from? It comes from Ummul Baneen. Ummul Baneen, before Karbala, when she sends her son, she says to them, if either one of you is killed before Abu Abdullah, I'll deny you are my child. She says to them, Abdullah, Uthman, Jafar, Abbas, if one of you dies before Hussein, I'd say I was a mother of only 3 children. Straight. If 2 of you die, Ummul Baneen had only 2 sons, hatta 3. If all of you were to die before Abu Abdullah, and not after him, and separately to him, I'd say I never had any children to begin with. All of you are for the sake of the son of Ali and Zahra. This level of Iman only and only comes when you see Ahlul Bayt and you see your family, you realize what they have is worth more than what I would want to give from them. They have so much more. Empathy is to give back towards them. That's a whole other level of Iman. And on the day of Ashura, interestingly, it only happens because of a lack of empathy. Why? You see a 6-month-old child who's thirsty. Think honestly, I'll come to Masiba, just think for a second. 6-month-old. It shouldn't matter what faith you are. 6-month-old Abdullah Radhi al-Asghar, 6 months. Where is the argument against giving water? Where is the empathy of saying, well, that could have been your children? Same thing later, Burair says on Ashura, one of the great companions, says to them, look, here are women, here are children, they are thirsty. He says to the enemy, I've seen you give water to Christian women and children, Jewish women and children, non-Ahl Kitab. I've seen you give to animals. Why don't you give to these people on Ashura? And they answered. There's a line in the Muqtada where they say, it's because we are the army of Yazid and there is no place for sympathy on the battlefield. They say it there and then. There's no place for this thing here. So Karbala happened because they wouldn't see someone else for who they are. Whereas we have a gift of unity among one another, which is I bleed for the same love. I'll give you one final narration and we'll end and go to Musiba. One last narration. Imam al-Sixth, when he says after, you know something? This hadith, he says, it should be written in gold. And it's the last thing I'll leave for all of you. He says, the person who has nafasul mahmoom bi dhulmina, just one of pain for our dhulm. So you have one moment of empathy for us. This one moment you have for us, he says, is the equivalent of jihad for the sake of Allah. It's tasbih for us. It's ibadat for us. And it is like keeping our secrets. Write this down, he says to all of them, in gold. We write it in our hearts, inshallah. This grief, this sadness, we'll never let go of it. And we only have it because of the sacrifice of Ali Muhammad, what they have gone through for us. We pray we can follow it, inshallah, until the end, inshallah. When you look at the words through love of Ahlul Bayt, you start seeing more and more love, but more and more pain which they went through. A mother will give her children to this religion. She'll send her children to the battlefield without any fear. Why don't I have this? It's because love of Ali Muhammad destroys and shatters the ego. They say when the family who have gone from Karbala to Kufa and Kufa to Sham are finally returning back to Medina, after everything they have gone through, the hadith say that when they left, they had a commander of their army. They had men, they had warriors, they had shabab. When they returned, there was only one man among them. When he left, he was young, Sajjad alayhi salam. When he comes back, his back has been bent and his hair has become white. Through all the musibah he's gone through. When they left, they had more children. Some they lost in Karbala, some they lost in the way to Karbala as they fell from camels. Some they left in Kufa, one girl they buried in Sham. And now they come back towards the home. They're not the same anymore. They say when they come, Rasulullah says to Bishr who's there, go to Medina, tell them we have returned. Announce towards them, the family have returned of Hussein alayhi salam. Bishr goes into Medina and says those words which breaks the heart of every moment. He enters on his horse, rides into the center of town and says, Ya Ahl Yathrib, qutila al-Hussein fi Karbala, fi yawm Ashura, bila ghuslihi wala kafan, badal fi dimah. O people of Yathrib, Hussein has been killed in Karbala. On the day of Ashura, his body lay for 3 days with no ghusl and no kafan. Buried in his blood, wild animals followed his body until someone buried that body. Now when he says this, people of course start crying. They say, Fatima starts crying, starts weeping, Abdullah starts crying, they all weep. One woman is not crying. one woman. They say Ummul Baneen walks old, holding on to support of the door and says, what do you mean Hussein has been killed? Which Hussein has been killed? Which Hussein? The idea that Abu Abdullah has been killed doesn't even register on her mind. She says, which Hussein? I don't understand. Bishop says, who are you? She says, I'm Ummul Baneen. Bishop comes off his horse on the ground and says, I have a message for you. She says what? He says, first of all, I have a message for you. Ya Ummul Baneen, Azam Allahu biwaladika al-Abdullah. I give condolence for you for your son Abdullah. Umar says, don't tell me Abdullah, what do you mean Hussein's been killed? Which Hussein has been killed? She says, Umar bin A'adam Allahu bi waladika al-Ja'far. May Allah give mercy for you and Ja'far. Umar says, may Allah accept the Mawla. Where is Hussein who you said has been killed? Which Hussein's been killed? Because Ya Ummul Baneen A'adam Allahu bi waladika al-Ja'far wal Uthman. May Allah accept the sacrifice of your sons Ja'far, Uthman, Abdullah. Umar says, don't tell me about my sons. Where is my son Hussein? Where is this child? Then because Ya Ummul Baneen A'adam Allahu bi waladika al-Abbas. When he says this, Ummul Baneen falls to the ground and says, Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah. Because Ya Ummul Baneen, I just said, may Allah have mercy on you for your son Abbas. You're crying for Hussein. Why? Ummul Baneen says, if it's true that my son Abbas has been killed, who was left to protect that ghareeb son of Zahra? If my Abbas has been killed, who remains for him? Then she says, tell me something. Ya Bishir, if it's true Abbas was killed, how is it possible he died and Hussein died after? Bishir says, do you know something? What? His body was covered in so many wounds. Some were arrows, some were swords. Umar says, stop. Do you know my Abbas? No sword can come near him. No arrow can strike him. What do you mean? There were so many wounds from him. Why didn't he defend himself with his arms? Because Ya Ummul Baneen, if Abbas had arms, he would have used them. Then she says, Wa Abbasa, how madroom were you? Your arms were cut before you were shaheed. Now when she hears the Ummul Baneen hears this musibah of Ahlul Bayt, then she sees Sayyidah Zainab walking towards her. When she sees Zainab, she says, Ya Zainab, I give condolence to you for Hussein. But Zainab says, Ya Ummul Baneen, I give condolence to you for Abbas. One by one they start telling each other musibah and they hug and mourn together. Now here's the most difficult part. Ummul Baneen sees all of them around them. She sees Zainab, Sajjad, all of them. She sees no Hussein. They say she then goes to Jannatul Baqi and says at the end of the Baqi, Assalamu alayka ya binti Rasulullah. Accept my salam, O daughter of Rasulullah. Now bear something in mind. Ummul Baneen's name originally is Fatima al-Kilabiyya. They say she changed her name. Why? One day she says to him, Ya Ali, Ya Mawlai, please change my name. No longer call me Fatima. Call me something. It says why? He says, every time you call me Fatima in the house, Hassan and Hussein look up looking for their mother. They look left and right, but they only see me. Ya Ali, I'm embarrassed that they called for Zahra and she's not there. From now on, you'll be called Ummul Baneen. This same Ummul Baneen says, Assalamu alayka ya binti Rasulullah. Take my salam, O daughter of Rasulullah. Why? She says, Ya Fatima, she says, I do not come to you to apologize for Abbas. Why? Because my Abbas gave his life for your son Hussein. They even say some narrations, Ummul Baneen would have a marthiyah. Which one did you say the words? Ya Abbas, they've told me that when you died, your arms were cut. What fell first to the ground, your cheeks or your chest? She says, I've never seen anyone who falls. They don't use their arms to stop their fall. Waladi Abbas, when you fell, what touched the ground first? Because Ya Fatima, I don't give condolence to you for this. Why? Because my Abbas gave his life for you. Why? She says, I give my apologies that after Abbas died, Zainab was taken to Kufa and Sham. One Mahram may have looked at her. My Abbas should have been there. There was a man, one hand wide, one hand the head of Abu Abdullah. My Abbas should have been there. Ummul Baneen said, maybe someone took hijab from your daughters. Where was my Abbas? Accept my apologies, Ya Zahra. My Abbas was not there for you. Many years later, or not long after, Ummul Baneen would go to Baqi and she'd build 4 graves there, one for each son. Then she'd build one 5th grave and she'd say, Ya Zahra, bear witness, the first 4 graves are for my sons, but the 5th is for your son. I won't mourn for my 4 until I mourn for your Hussein. Now we come to that difficult last moment of Ummul Baneen's life, her last moment, which is what? all through her life, Ummul Baneen is doing the recitation of the Musibah of Abu Abdullah. It's well known. One riwayat says Marwan, with anger, poisons her for the sake of this grief. Ummul Baneen, her last moments are what? She's lying on her deathbed, her last moments in life. They say at that time, Fidda comes towards her. It says, Ya Ummul Baneen, you've lived a life of sadness, a life of grief. Do you have any last wasiyah for me, any last words for me, anything I should remember you by? Ummul Baneen says, I have a few last words. Every time you think of me, say these words. These are the last words I want to be known by. Fidda says, Ummul Baneen, what are your last words that when you die, these are your only words to remember? Ummul Baneen says, my last words are these. Assalamu alayka ya Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. Assalamu alayka ya Gharib Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Ridwan wa qada'ihi wa taslim bi amrihi. Ya Allah, ya Allah, ya Allah. For the sake of Ummul Baneen, accept the amal of all the azadar of this earth, Ya Allah. Ya Allah, for the sake of Ali Muhammad, help all of our children on the path of Ahlul Bayt, Ya Allah. Ya Allah, any of our sins we've committed, bihaqqi Ummul Baneen, forgive all of our sins, Ya Allah. Ya Allah, any of the marhumin of the families of the Bani Majlis, forgive all of the actions of their family, inshallah. And finally, Ya Allah, let these gatherings of the shabab, of the youth, bring away and bring closely, inshallah, the return of Muhammad Zaman, inshallah. اللهم إني أسألك بحق فاطمة وأبيها بعلي وبنيها والسر المستعوذ فيها أن تصلي على محمد وآل محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. ويا حسين ومصابه
Tell me the good news of his victory. Tell me he is well, break my misery. Tell me he is strong, tell me he still stands. If only with Abbas I'd give him my hands. If only I could shield my beloved Hussein from all the heartache, from all of the pain. And then your world broke and tears would descend. If only his death your tears could amend. Oh, the pain you'd face on that fateful eve, one of your Hussein news you would receive. Oh, Ummul Baneen, oh, Ummul Baneen, oh, Ummul Baneen, oh, Ummul Baneen. How strength you could feel with your broken back, with your heart knowing he won't return back. How patient you stayed with his departure, knowing that your son is now a martyr. How much does pain take? Is it a lifetime? As for your whole life broke after this crime, mother of sons, for them he has called, they have all fallen, taken their last breath. Oh, Ummul Baneen, oh, Ummul Baneen, oh, Ummul Baneen, oh, Ummul Baneen. Oh, mother of sons, for them has called death, they have all fallen, taken their last breath. Your roses wilted, they bloom no longer, but for their message you must stay stronger. And loving you stayed, serving your ummah. And when you're asked why, you say for Zahra, you knew what you felt for her was much worse. May Hussein's killer forever be cursed. If only with them your hearts could unite, for your world is dark, Hussein was your light. You lost all that day, alone you would stay. You teach your ummah when broken to pray. Oh, Ummul Baneen, oh, Ummul Baneen, oh, Ummul Baneen, oh, Ummul Baneen. You lost all that day, alone you would stay. You teach your ummah when broken to pray. God truly heals all, he's the all-loving, and after each loss victory's coming. Oh, Hussein lives on, he lives in our tears. He's changed our lives, he shaped our years. And your son Abbas taught us sacrifice, to give for Allah no matter the price. Oh, your brave soldiers, may like we be them, and serve our Hussein in history 1-3, to give for Allah no matter to see before me Hussein fall. Karbala, ya Karbala, ya Karbala, Karbala, ya Karbala, ya Karbala, Karbala, ya Karbala, ya Karbala, Karbala, ya Karbala, ya Karbala. With an arrow to my eye, I could still see like Zainab. I still saw nothing but beauty. Proud they were, I was blind, little did they know. For Hussein on death itself, myself I throw. Karbala, ya Karbala, ya Karbala, Karbala, ya Karbala, ya Karbala, Karbala, ya Karbala, ya Karbala, Karbala, ya Karbala, ya Karbala. They hit me with a bull, my balance I lost. No arms to support from my horse, I was tossed. But mother, despite everything that they took, still to Master Hussein with guilt I would look. Karbala, ya Karbala, ya Karbala, Karbala, ya Karbala, ya Karbala, Karbala, ya Karbala, ya Karbala. The more I wanted to offer, I was not done. For me the battle hadn't even begun. But mother, forgive me, to me death had come. How could I leave when Hussein hadn't yet won? Karbala, ya Karbala, ya Karbala, Karbala, ya Karbala, ya Karbala, Karbala, ya Karbala, ya Karbala, Karbala, ya Karbala, ya Karbala. Mother, though in my grave you have my support, continue my mission for which I had fought. Mother, for forgiveness I ask you again, for I departed and alone stands Hussein. Karbala, ya Karbala, ya Karbala, 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 Karbala, ya Karbala, ya Karbala.
صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. For those who don't speak Arabic, this is a poem where the poet asks Ummul Baneen alayhi salam, what kind of a son have you raised for him to be ever so brave?
زلمة من ربوتي عالصعب بارتي أم البنين أم البنين زلمة من ربوتي عالصعب بارتي أم البنين أم البنين زلمة من ربوتي عالصعب بارتي أم البنين أم البنين من ربيتي عالصعب بارتي أم البنين أم البنين زلمة من ربيتي عالصعب بارتي أم البنين أم البنين حضر خضع الحومة بسه واليمر ما يرجع نجم لو مر بسماء يطيح يمه ويرجع ظل العمر على معسكر من أرضهم يطلع مو شخص مر عليه جيش كنا توزع مو شخص مر عليه جيش كنا توزع بالفعل خطيتي زلمة من ربيتي أم البنين أم البنين زلمة من ربيتي عالصعب بارتي أم البنين أم البنين زلمة من ربيتي عالصعب بارتي أم البنين أم البنين شنو راضعته بحبيبك كل شي ما هز طولك هذا راضعته الشجاعة من علي منقولك هاي بس هاي الأصل هاي بس معقولك ولذلك لو تذكر حيدر يصيحولك ولذلك لو تذكر
عالصعب باريتي أم البنين سلمى من ربيتي عالصعب باريتي أم البنين أم البنين شنو رابعة الحنين كل شي ما هزطولي أظل رابعة الشجاع من عليم القول هاي بس هاي الأصل هاي بس معقولة ولذلك لو تلت حيدر يصيحوله ولذلك لو تلت حيدر يصيحوله من علي خليتي سلمى من ربيتي أم البنين أم البنين سلمى من ربيتي عالصعب باريتي أم البنين أم البنين سلمى من ربيتي عالصعب باريتي أم البنين أم البنين شنو رابعة الحنين كل شي ما هزطولي أظل رابعة الشجاع من علي منقول هاي بس هاي الأصل هاي بس معقولة ولذلك لو تلت حيدر يصيحوله ولذلك لو تلت حيدر يصيحوله من علي خليتي سلمى من ربيتي أم البنين أم البنين سلمى من ربيتي عالصعب باريتي أم البنين أم البنين سلمى من ربيتي عالصعب باريتي أم البنين أم البنين موت خطر سيف سوى المستحيل من يمين الحومة بي كيف ياخذها وتميل من يمين الحومة بي كيف ياخذها وتميل كبوري يدي بفروض الحرب فرض من الجليل انتي ربتي يا فاطم انت يا مزينب كفيل انتي ربتي يا فاطم انت يا مزينب كفيل انتي ربتي يا فاطم انت يا مزينب كفيل كافل وخليتي سلمى من ربيتي أم البنين أم البنين سلمى من ربيتي عالصعب باريتي أم البنين أم البنين سلمى من ربيتي عالصعب باريتي أم البنين أم البنين سلمى من ربيتي عالصعب باريتي أم البنين أم البنين لو الوعش والجيل والله جحاصر الحسين مالك الدنيا بعزم قائد الكون بيقين شافقت زينب أمين ما يمر بها العين كان دين الله ونبي ما بقت بملحدين كان دين الله ونبي ما بقت بملحدين والله جاوفتي سلمى من ربيتي أم البنين أم البنين سلمى من ربيتي عالصعب باريتي أم البنين أم البنين سلمى من ربيتي عالصعب باريتي أم البنين أم البنين لو النوع شويتي والله جحاصر الحسين مالك الدنيا بعزم قائد الكون بيقين شافقت زينب أمين ما يمر بها العين كان دين الله ونبي ما بقت بملحدين كان دين الله ونبي ما بقت بملحدين والله جاوفتي سلمى من ربيتي أم البنين أم البنين سلمى من ربيتي عالصعب باريتي أم البنين أم البنين سلمى من ربيتي عالصعب باريتي أم البنين أم البنين وفى وبأقدس الأمان الطاوب سر الوجود قدسة للأخوة المثال والله أنا الشد بهاي غير متأكد محال بالسمت بين الملال
تحت عرش الله يقال بالسمت بين الملاك تحت عرش الله يقال انتي ايش سويتي زلمة من ربيتي ام البنين ام البنين زلمة من ربيتي عالصعب ضريتي ام البنين ام البنين زلمة من ربيتي عالصعب ضريتي ام البنين ام البنين وفى باقدس كمال انقوي بسر الوجود وتسال الاخوه المثال والله انا الشد بهذا غير متاكد محال بالسمت بين الملاك تحت عرش الله يقال بالسمت بين الملاك تحت عرش الله يقال انتي ايش سويتي زلمه من ربيتي ام البنين ام البنين زلمه من ربيتي عالصعب ضريتي ام البنين ام البنين زلمه من ربيتي عالصعب ضريتي ام البنين ام البنين لو عشرتي والله جا صار الحسين مالك الدنيا بعزم قائد الكون بيقين جابوا قد زينب امين ما يمر بها لعين كان دين الله ونبي ما بقت بملحدين كان دين الله ونبي ما بقت بملحدين والله شافيتي زلمه من ربيتي ام البنين ام البنين زلمه من ربيتي عالصعب ضريتي ام البنين ام البنين زلمه من ربيتي عالصعب ضريتي ام البنين ام البنين كافر وفى وبأقدس كمال انطوي بسر الوجود وتسال الاخوه المثال والله انا الشد بهاي غير متاكد محال بالسمت بين الملاك تحت عرش الله يقال بالسمت بين الملاك تحت عرش الله يقال بالسمت بين الملاك تحت عرش الله يقال انتي ايش سويتي زلمه من ربيتي ام البنين ام البنين زلمه من ربيتي عالصعب ضريتي ام البنين ام البنين زلمه من ربيتي عالصعب ضريتي ام البنين ام البنين
رايح الغالي غير احوالي حسينا شوقي تعبني ضيعت ابني حسينا رايح الغالي غير احوالي حسينا شوقي تعبني ضيعت ابني حسينا رايح الغالي غير احوالي حسينا شوقي تعبني ضيعت ابني حسينا رايح الغالي غير احوالي حسينا شوقي تعبني ضيعت ابني حسينا سافر الغالي وترك بقلبي ناري سافر الغالي وترك بقلبي ناري سافر الغالي وترك بقلبي ناري هاي من شوقة حبيب اشتاقت العين هاي من شوقة حبيب اشتاقت العين هاي نجم الفرقة درت حلوين هاي نجم الفرقة درت حلوين ناشدت كل الاشوفه وين الحسين ناشدت كل الاشوفه وين الحسين ليلي سهرته وابني ضيعته ليلي سهرته وابني ضيعته حسينا دهري عذبني ضيعت ابني حسينا رايح الغالي احوالي حسينا شوقي تعبني ضيعت ابني حسينا رايح الغالي غير احوالي حسينا شوقي تعبني ضيعت ابني حسينا
غايب من عيوني لكن عايش وياي عايش وياي بالمشي اشعر خياله يمشي وياي يا حبيب امك غيابك يصعب هواي
يا حبيب امك غيابك يصعب هواي
مدري ليش اصلا وفزت نشرب الماي
مدري ليش اصلا وفزت نشرب الماي
نشف رياقي عاصف اشواقي
حسينا
فكري دول ابني ضيعت
ابني حسينا رايح الغالي غير احوالي حسينا شوقي تعبني ضيعت ابني حسينا
فدوتك 4 بنين وكل الاحباب
فدوتك 4 بنين وكل الاحوال
غايب وماخذ هواي والهوى الهاي
يا علي يا علي
حيدر
يا علي حيدر يا علي حيدر يا علي
غايب وماخذ هواي والهوى الهاي
غايب وماخذ هواي والهوى الهاي
يعني ترضاها نام بعتبة الباب
يعني ترضاها نام بعتبة الباب
يا ضوء عيون ابتعادك مو بالحساب
يا بعد يوم
يا ضوء عيون ابتعادك مو بالحساب هدم اركاني معول احزاني
حسينا
ليلي يرعبني
ضيعت ابني حسينا
غير
الغالي غير احوالي حسينا
شوقي
تعبني ضيعت ابني حسينا
زخرفت بابك يا يوم باحمر اللون
زخرفت بابك يا يوم باحمر اللون
مو صبغ هذا تشوفه دمع العيون لا رسالة ولا وصية ولا تنشدون
لا رسالة ولا وصية ولا تنشدون
مدري شنو يصيح بدني من يرجعون مدري شنو يصيح بدني ما يرجعون راحوا من ايدك ذبحوا وليدك
حسينا
صوته صوبني
ضيعت ابني حسينا رايح الغالي غير احوالي حسينا شوقي تعبني ضيعت ابني حسينا رايح الغالي غير احوالي حسينا شوقي تعبني ضيعت ابني حسينا
كسرة الخاطر يا يوم ما تكسر قلوب
كسرة الخاطر يا يوم ما تكسر قلوب
خل يموت اللي راح منها اغلى محبوب
خل يموت اللي راح منها اغلى محبوب
عمري بالغالي عمري يا الغالي فنيت بين الدروب
عمري يا غالي بين الدروب
يا ابني ظهر امك حنيت وجبني مصيوب راحت اضلاعي من عناعي
حسينا
قلت له جاوبني
ضيعت ابني حسينا
غير
بابي
رايح الغالي خلي
احوالي حسينا شوقي تعبني ضيعت ابني حسينا رايح الغالي غير احوالي حسينا شوقي تعبني ضيعت ابني حسينا
هاي بن حفله سألتك وانطر جواب، هاي بن حلم سألتك وانطر جواب. قلب
يا علي يا علي
قالها ظل حسين عالي فوق التراب، قالها ظل حسين عالي
فوق التراب،
والخيول بصدره داست والقمر غاب، والخيول بصدره داست والقمر غاب. والأشد منها يا زينب ويا الجناب، والأشد لها يا زينب ويا الجناب. رحمة الباري عالترب عاري
حسينا
من يجاوبني
ضيعت ابني حسينا، رايح الغالي غير احوالي حسينا، شوقي تعبني ضيعت ابني حسينا.
اسمع راح اغيرها بنفس اللحن سيم تون. ناظر سنيني خدمة حسيني يا دنيا، ساعة حسابي يمنت كتابي يا دنيا.
ناظر سنيني خدمة حسيني يا دنيا، ساعة حسابي يمنت كتابي يا دنيا. ناظر سنيني خدمة حسيني يا دنيا، ساعة حسابي يبني كتابي يا دنيا.
الله وصف هالخداعة واحنا باقين،
الله وصف الخداعة واحنا باقين،
حتى لو يخلص عمرنا نخدم حسين،
حتى لو يخلص عمرنا نخدم حسين.
سيدي وللموت صحنا وياك ماشيين،
سيدي وللموت صحنا وياك ماشيين،
ما تمر بينا الليالي وتمضي السنين،
ما تمر بينا الليالي وتمضي السنين.
حسين سلطاني ملك خلاني يا دنيا، يصبح جوابي
يملت كتابي يا دنيا. ناظر سنيني خدمة حسيني يا دنيا، ساعة حسابي يبنت كتابي يا دنيا.
يلتلومون علينا تبكي العيون،
يلومون علينا تبكي العيون،
ماكو مثل حسين عندكم
لو تموتون، ماكو مثل حسين عندكم لو تموتون، ماكو مثل حسين عندكم لو تموتون.
والله بتراب المقدس ما تمرون،
والله بتراب المقدس ما تمرون،
مثل حر جنود عنده عابس وجون،
مثل حر جنود عنده عابس وجون.
صرخة ثورية
على الوهابية، صرخة ثورية على الوهابية، صرخة ثورية على الوهابية
يا دنيا. ضد الارهابي
يبنت كتابي يا دنيا. ناظر سنيني خدمة حسيني يا دنيا، ساعة حسابي يبنت كتابي يا دنيا. ناظر سنيني خدمة حسيني يا دنيا، ساعة حسابي يمنت كتابي يا دنيا.
يلتلومون عليها تبكي العيون،
يلتلومون علينا تبكي العيون،
ماكو مثل حسين عندكم لو
تموتون، ماكو مثل حسين عندكم لو تموتون.
والله بتراب المقدس ما تمرون،
والله بتراب المقدس ما تمرون،
مثل حر جنود عنده عابس وجون،
مثل حر جنود عنده عابس وجون.
صرخة ثورية
على الوهابية، صرخة ثورية على الوهابية يا دنيا.
ضد الارهابي
كتابي يا دنيا ناذر سنيني خدمة حسيني يا دنيا ساعة حسابي يمنة كتابي يا دنيا
احنا جننا هواك وتعرف الناس احنا جننا هواك وتعرف الناس والله ما نخلف عهدنا بقطع الانفاس
والله ما نخلف عهدنا بقطع الانفاس
رافض ويبقى علمنا بايد عباس
رافض ويبقى علمنا بايد عباس
لا أمية ولا يزيد ولا نطخ راس
لا أمية ولا يزيد ولا نطخ راس
حبنا مو كافي لما نوافي يا دنيا أنشد أحبابي يمنة كتابي
يا دنيا ناذر سنيني خدمة حسيني يا دنيا ساعة حسابي يمنة كتابي يا دنيا
ناذر
سنيني خدمة حسيني يا دنيا ساعة حسابي يمنة كتابي يا دنيا حسين 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 حسين
حسين حسين لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول الله عليا ولي الله عليا ولي الله عليا ولي الله
بحق مريض كربلاء زين العابدين ورحم الله من قرأ سورة الفاتحة لكل المؤمنين والمؤمنات لا سيما جهاد الخياط تسبق الصلاة على محمد وآل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
والحسن والحسين.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
جيل فاطمة الزهراء بأعلى أصواتكم.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Jazakumullah khair jazaa brothers for attending this majlis. May Allah reward you. Inshallah, this food was made by the youth of Ahlul Bayt, an organization based in Manchester who creates food for majalis such as these. May Allah reward them. Please take, if you need to go, you can take, or if you want to stay, you can also stay. Jazakumullah khair.
Yes, my boys. Today's is better. I'm pathetic, bro. I gotta, you know what I mean?